When we as a community believe that our important historic landmarks are not worth saving, what are we saying about our history and about our identity and about ourselves and about our importance in American history? If all communities who have historic resources, who have important historic buildings said, no big deal, let's turn it into a parking lot. Right? What if we said, oh, you know, the White House is not that big of a deal. Mount Vernon, so what? It's an old building, let's replace it, let's put a mall there. Everybody would be up in arms and say, well, no, that's a symbol of the father of our country. That's a symbol of our great nation. Well, for Filipino Americans, we need to start looking at these historic landmarks like that, as an important part of our identity, as a way in which we say, look at how far we have come in the United States, look at the dreams of our ancestors, look at what they had wanted for us, and look at how much we've been able to achieve because they've paved the path for us. And when we say, go ahead and tear down those buildings, they're not that important to us, symbolically we're saying that we don't really care about our history, we don't know anything about it, and so go ahead, turn it into a mall, turn it into a parking lot, turn it into a freeway.
It's the very first Filipino lodge established in Stockton, California. It's the first building of the set lodge that actually was a boarding house to many of the Filipino Manongs that came over during the first wave of Filipinos.
The Filipinos were brought to America to be laborers, and they recruited by regions. And so a lot of his townmates were brought here. They lacked English, they didn't know English too much. Some of them had never graduated from school. And so it was an outlet, number one, to feel not like a second-class citizen, but to build self-esteem for themselves.
If you came to a foreign country and you had no family, no friends, how significant is it to belong to community and to be in community?
The fraternity itself had shown such loyalty to each other. I mean, they would just protect each other and anyone in need. We didn't go on to welfare because the organization, the fraternity brothers and sisters gathered together and saw to it that no one was in need as far as food or even lodging. This place was a safe place for the bachelors especially.
The Daguhoy Lodge, as well as the other lodges, were significant at that time.
In this large room that we're in right now, it was used for meetings, for gatherings, and then rented out to different community organizations. Now we're in the fifth generation of them doing this, for parties and birthdays and wedding receptions.
It was just a wonderful time, and it was a closeness that I haven't seen in a long time.
It was always a place for all the families to gather. And the main gathering we used to have, besides the meetings that they would have, was a Christmas party every year.
That was the time that we all got together as families, members.
Food, it'd be like 15 courses of food, lines out the door.
It served as really a social gathering area that Filipinos could meet without any fear of prejudice or racism.
We could not socialize, let's say, north of Main or Weber Avenue. We could rent a hall there for an activity on Weber Avenue, and that was about it. But to buy homes even, we couldn't go north of Main.
This building symbolizes a number of things. For one, it symbolizes the growth and the strength, the important role of the Filipino community in this city and in this region. It's one of the very few we have left. The Little Manila Historic Site was at one point the largest, most vibrant Filipino American community in the nation. Now, much of it is gone because of redevelopment and because of the Crosstown Freeway, and we only really have a handful of buildings that are left.
This is invaluable. There is not another place on the planet that has this type of history, this type of culture that we could actually come, visit, look at, touch, smell, and see that it's a part of our living American Filipino history. When I came here and I moved my martial arts school here from North Stockton. The elders here didn't want to charge me for having my Eskrima school here. And so I asked them, what can I do to help? Because, you don't want to take any money or anything from me. So they said, well, why don't you clean out the basement? And after pulling all the stuff away from the wall, we noticed that there was 3 doors. We never even seen the doors there. We found out that there was 3 secret rooms in the basement here that no one even knew about. And so what we did very carefully is that we actually opened each room, and we found that there was beds, cots, clothes that were still hanging in a makeshift closet. There was still shoes and things that they would use, for instance, asparagus knives, pruning shears, their work shoes. In fact, a couple of the rooms looked like they were just, someone got up, left, and just never came back, so they just closed the room. If you can imagine, the bed was here, also the nightstand that's around the bed that's out on display. This looks like a camp shop where they would live, for instance, on the asparagus camp or the asparagus fields. This photo looks like it's a photo of members of the lodge here, because this is the upstairs building, upstairs in the social hall. But yeah, this is the type of treasures we would find. This looks like it's a part of a certificate from the lodge. You can see a date, 1940, looks like 41, I think, 1941. But we actually have better copies of this still in the frame. And they all have significant value to the lodge because of their Masonic order. We found many letters, documents. Here's some, God, see? We don't even plan this, but we found some more photos here. It looks like maybe their family in the Philippines. It's like that. Every time we come down here, we find something that's very significant value to the Filipino community, but also to American history, because they played a very huge role in the production of agriculture in America, but also in the San Joaquin Valley, which is, the economy of California is based around agricultural work. And that's the reason why a lot of those huge plantation or those labor forces went over to the Philippines to recruit these young Pinoys, what we call Pinoys, over to America and work in the fields. The center room, we discovered there was approximately 20, I believe it was 26 of those old wardrobe trunks, those really big trunks. Inside of those trunks were treasures of that person. When the Manong would pass away, they would take his trunk and store all his stuff in the trunk, meaning his clothing, photos that he had, papers like his naturalization, his citizenship papers. A jacket, he must have been in the military, maybe in the 1st or the 2nd Filipino Infantry. Right after the bombing of Pearl Harbor on December 7th, the day after, December 8th, the Japanese bombed Manila Bay. And at that time, Filipinos rushed to join the military, and they formed the 1st, and because there was so many Filipinos joining, they also formed the 2nd Filipino Infantry. So they had about 12,000 men in the 1st and 2nd Filipino Infantry. This is the insignia of the 1st. What we did is we decided to make kind of a memorial or a museum in the basement to try to show some of those really unique things. In fact, it was kind of like a time capsule. Many of the stuff that we found down here, like this heat tray here that would heat their food, they probably cooked down here with making coffee or boiling some water. A lot of dresser drawers with mirrors, really neat artifacts that they used back in the 30s, 20s and 30s that we found down here that we put on display. In this particular case, we have what we call the regalia, or the formal dress of the Filipino lodge, and this one is the Leonarios de Trabajo of America. But this one right here, very, very elaborate embroidery and things that are done here. This is a very old one, and you can tell by the color. But this is a 33rd degree regalia, which is worn by the highest ranking level in the lodge. The Daguhoy Lodge, their band participated in many of the social functions and also in many of the parades that they held in the 30s and 40s. In fact, many of these photos right here were taken of, for instance, this one, you could see the marching band there, and I believe this one was in the 1947 4th of July parade.
It's a reminder when we go down to the basement, you know, and see these incredible artifacts and be able to touch them and see them and be reminded of that struggle and that sacrifice. You know, and it's not a depressing story, it's a joyful story, because here we are. You know, look at all that we've been able to achieve because of all this sacrifice. I really hope that everyone has an opportunity to come down here and that they don't see it as a scary place to be. And really, like I said, for many generations, this place was the center of joy and the center of home.
I think it has to be a museum to show what transpired when the Filipinos came back in the early 30s and what happened to them as a culture.
To me, it just shows that you know where your roots are, where you came from, and how hard your people worked.
We don't have anywhere in terms of a museum or anything that's kept or restored. You know, it'd be nice I know that there's a lot of memorabilia around that can hopefully be saved and have a place, a home to live in. What better venue than to be in with all the pictures and, you know, all the regalia from the Daguhoy Lodge being displayed for them to see.
The younger people are not as interested in joining fraternities. And it's a shame because there is a lot of property and benefits that they can derive from being a member.
So I invite all those newcomers to come and see if it is to continue the dreams of our people, our old people who stayed here.
The younger one should come and take over. Like me, I'm already in over in the 70s, and I'm 76, and it's hard to be more productive after that. So we are appealing to the younger generation that will come, join us, and be a part of our Legionarios del Trabajo that originally started from the Philippines and still going strong there.
If I am one of the children of the Daguhoy, then you can imagine how it has impacted the other children and their children. So there is such a wonderful legacy to the Daguhoy.
For Filipino Americans, we need to start looking at these historic landmarks like that as an important part of our identity, as a way in which we say, look at how far we have come in the United States, look at the dreams of our ancestors, look at what they had wanted for us, and look at how much we've been able to achieve because they've paved the path for us. And when we say, go ahead and tear down those buildings, they're not that important to us, symbolically we're saying that we don't really care about our history, we don't know anything about it, and so go ahead, turn it into a mall, turn it into a parking lot, turn it into a freeway. Right? And that is really a really sad place for our community to be when we have such a rich history that everyone needs to learn about, not just Filipinos, but everyone in the United States needs to learn about the contributions of this very important community, and particularly everyone in Stockton needs to understand the role, the integral role we play in the history of the city and in the history of this region and the history of California agriculture itself.
This is the last building of its kind that actually housed and gave social activity to those that at one time had nowhere to go. This is the last remaining building. There is no more. And if such does happen where this building is lost, so is the culture of the Filipino people in Stockton. This is a living testament to the contributions and the sacrifices our forefathers had when they first came to America to make our life better. It's really a sad situation when this is all that's left. And to this day, it still seems that our area or this area is still neglected, just like it was back in the 20s and 30s. You know, no one wanted to have anything to do with this part of town. And the city doesn't want to have anything to do with this part of town. It's just easier to knock things down and disperse people and have them pick up and leave than to try to restore it or fix it. This building was built in 1895. Outside of being a Filipino landmark, of lodge activity, this is an old building that has a lot of history. It's probably one of the oldest buildings in the city, but yet there's nothing being done. Little Manila Foundation, the Stockton Fonz Group, and basically Bahalana Martial Arts is the only ones that are really trying to do anything to preserve what history and culture we have left.